Shall I compare thee to a summer's day? Thou art more lovely and more temperate. Those words were written many years ago by the immortal bard Shakespeare. And Shakespeare had the right idea. The whole idea is about how do you make something into a metaphor. You compare something to something else. Compare the unfamiliar to the familiar so people get a sense of what's going on. In Shakespeare's case, he was comparing his love to a summer's day and seeing how similar they were and how the comparison fit together. Do the same thing in your speaking. Metaphors have power. And a metaphor is simply when you say it's sort of like, or you use it's as if, like or as, are the magic words for metaphor. If you just use like or as, you know you have a metaphor going on. A metaphor can really work well because people instantly get it. Even if they don't understand all that other details about whatever you're talking about, if they can understand something common, something simple, something everybody knows, they can get your point. The metaphor helps bridge that connection and make that connection happen, make that connection work. It's a magical, magical thing. It's the metaphor. Use it well in your speech. If you don't use it well, there are problems. People don't understand the metaphor, it's too complex, goes right over their head, they don't get it, and then your speech has a tendency to kind of go like that. You don't want that to happen. And there are three things, three tools you really need to have if you're going to master metaphors. If you're really going to make metaphors work for you, you need to have these three tools. And if you use them, you'll make your stories more interesting, make your stories more engaging, more accessible to your audience. You'll find that the audience connects better with what you're saying. You'll find your movements on stage really go well and help reinforce and develop and build that connection with your audience. And using metaphors well is something you can do, and it's simple to do once you understand the basics of it. So today we're going to talk about metaphors, how to make metaphors work for you, about the right way to use metaphors and some of the hazards of the wrong ways of using metaphors. You will learn how to use metaphors effectively. You will discover how metaphors can help juice up your story, make your stories more interesting. You'll find out a very simple technique you can use to help the audience keep track of the metaphors and even use the metaphors to your advantage in getting your point across to your audience. Metaphors are powerful, metaphors are useful, and there are 3 points you really need to understand. The common problem speakers have is that they don't get across their point to the audience. The audience just doesn't get it. It doesn't sink into their head. Metaphors make sure that it sinks into the head. Metaphors make sure that the audience understands what's being said. Because a metaphor forms a vivid picture in people's minds. From that vivid picture, they understand what you're talking about. That vivid picture helps them to connect. Metaphors are probably underused. People don't use metaphors that much. But you can. And you can learn how to use metaphors and learn how to use metaphors well. So, after this presentation, you'll understand metaphors. Where to use them. How to use them. How to use them effectively. And how to avoid some of the traps some speakers fall into when attempting these metaphors. So join me, learn about how to master metaphors. the first step for creating a metaphor for your speech is a simple one, one many speakers forget. Instead of doing the first step, they jump right into the second step. You have to do the first step first. Without that first step, metaphor isn't going to be engaging. It's going to be interesting. It's not going to connect with your audience. It's not going to spark that "never thought of that before" reaction from your audience. It'll be the same old, same old. Won't see things the same way. It just won't make that connection. You have to do that first step. So many speakers jump into the second step. Just got to do the first step. And the first step is to simply ask yourself, what can this concept I'm trying to get across the audience possibly compare to? And the mistake a lot of speakers make is they censor. They think, okay, well, what does it compare to? Well, it's sort of like this, it's sort of like that. And they limit things because ideas flash into their mind and say, wouldn't it be cool if I could compare this to that? And then instantly their mind says, nah, that's not going to work. There's no comparison there. Forget about that. Just move on. What if I compared public speaking to bowling? Ah! The mind says, ridiculous! Forget about it. Stop. Don't do it. Yet, compare public speaking to bowling, and you're speaking to a bunch of people who bowl, or you're speaking to a bunch of bowlers. It'd be great. It'd be wonderful. Compare public speaking to pipe fitting. You're speaking to a bunch of pipe fitters. Fantastic. Instead of eliminating things, think about instead all the different things you possibly could compare your idea to. And just ask yourself, which ones are going to go best with the audience I'm going to be speaking to? If you can compare whatever your idea is, I use public speaking for example, your idea can be anything, and relate that directly to the audience you're speaking to. Relate that directly to the passions, the interests, the things your audience deals with every day. You can make that connection between what you're talking about and their everyday world. Wow! What a metaphor you have. What a wonderful metaphor. Now it's tempting at this point to try to sort things out and start to do comparisons. Okay, this is sort of like this is sort of like that. Don't do that. There's a very simple tool we'll talk about in just a bit that'll help you sort out these comparisons and find the comparisons that best fit between these two seemingly opposite things. So don't do that right now. Right now, just open up your mind to the possibilities. What could you possibly compare something to? And how is that comparison going to work in terms of your audience? If you're trying to figure out what to compare to, you can think about your audience. That's one thing. Another thing is to just think about differences. If you can create a metaphor that links together things that supposedly are opposite or completely different, that's another powerful metaphor. Remember, when you're doing a metaphor, the goal is to catch the audience's mind, to get them thinking in a different way, to get them thinking differently about things, get them to have that whoa reaction. Wow. That's what you want people to think after you hear the metaphor. They think, never thought of it that way. Interesting. Open your audience up to a new way of thinking. That's what you want to do. So the first step is just say, what are different things that this concept of my speech could be compared to? And instead of eliminating things in the beginning, just think about what the possibilities there are. Think about it in terms of matching your what you're talking about in your speech to the interests of your audience. You do that. That first step will be very useful and very important when you come to the all-important second step. Once you've decided what it is you want to compare something to, then you're ready to create the metaphor. And the mistake a lot of speakers make is they just kind of start thinking, okay, top of my head, gee, does this compare to that? And it really doesn't. Does bowling compare to speaking? Well, bowling isn't really much like speaking. Okay. Is a tree like speaking? Not really. And they start comparing things on top of and off their head, on the top of their head, and it just doesn't work. Just doesn't work. The thing is, you really need this second tool. And this second tool is a technique, and it's a tool you can use anytime, anywhere to find that metaphor. You can even take things that seem completely opposite and find that common connection. It's a simple tool, an easy tool, an effective tool, and if you use it, you're going to find metaphors where you never thought you could. It'll create a powerful story that'll engage people because they'll think, wow, I never thought of that. And that's the reaction you want to get from your audience. Here's all you do. On a piece of paper, write down on one side what it is you're talking about. Whatever it is, it's public speaking, if you're talking about some sort of legal thing you're doing in front of lawyers, if you're talking to doctors, you're doing some sort of doctor thing, if you're talking about civic activities or civil rights or whatever it is you're talking about, put that on one side. Other side, put down what you want to compare it to. So if you want to compare public speaking to bowling, put down bowling here and public speaking over here. And then it's very, very simple. On this side, let's say you're talking about public speaking, comparing it to bowling. Write down everything you can think about public speaking. And then when you finish that, on this side, write down everything you can think about bowling. Let's stop right there. As mentioned earlier, the challenge is that when you're thinking about things, you start to censor. You think, oh, I can't do that, I can't do that. For this exercise, don't censor. Write down everything you can think about. So public speaking, every single thing you can think about public speaking goes here, or whatever you're talking about. Whatever your subject is, just write down everything you can find out about it. And if you don't know everything about it, research it, study it, find out more. Write it all down. On this side, if you need to flip it over in the back, start writing the back. Do that on that one side of the paper. That completely filled out. And then, the other side of the paper, same thing with that subject, whatever it is. Everything you can find out about bowling. You're going to compare public speaking to bowling. Everything you find about bowling, about pin setting, and the 10 pin, and the strike, and a spare, and all of that different terminology, all that stuff, write it all down. Now remember, when you're doing a metaphor, you must make sure your audience understands all these things too. If you create a really complex metaphor and the audience doesn't get it, that's not going to work. So that's why I originally suggested in step one, think about things your audience is going to be interested in. Think about things you're talking about to the audience and use that for your metaphor. Once you do that, the final step is to start simply circling the places where there's the same word or a very similar word on both sides. That's it. You just go down the list and you say, oh look, here's a word here, and here's a word over here. And you just start going all the way down. So if you're talking about public speaking, and you're talking about going through the experience of public speaking, sometimes you can get knocked down in your speech. And of course, bowling pins can get knocked down too. So that might be a comparison. So a failure in a public speech is sort of like knocking down the pins in bowling. And continue that comparison all the way down. The whole thing all the way down. When you finish up, you will find that you have some really interesting comparisons. You create great metaphors for it. Say that Public speaking is just like bowling because find those places where there are those connections. Whatever audience you're speaking to, if you're speaking to that bowling audience, they will connect with that. They will suddenly understand what it is you're talking about, and they will connect in. Very powerful, very great, simple technique. Use it. Create those powerful metaphors for your audience. Now you're ready to put it all together. First thing you did is you thought about as many different possible things you might use for a metaphor. Then you figured out how to make that metaphor work with the tool that showed you how to compare different things. So you had on one side, you had what you're trying to create the metaphor about, and then what you're trying to compare it to. So if you say bowling is like speaking, and one side of the paper will be bowling, the other side will be speaking. There's one thing missing. One thing so far we haven't quite gotten to. And without this, of course, there is no point to any of these exercises. You can create as many metaphors as you want, but until you get to this final third tool, until you use this final third tool, there's really nothing there that you can do. There's really nothing there that you can work with, really nothing there at all. You can try to kind of throw some metaphors together in your speech somewhere. Without this third tool, it won't really fit, won't really work, it won't really connect. Which is, of course, what the metaphor is all about. Metaphor is an attempt to try to connect the audience. Get the audience to think of something that they know, then compare that to something that they don't know, and see the connections. So they can say, ah, okay, I understand what that's about now. Without the third tool, none of that happens, none of that connection is made. And the third tool is to use the metaphor in a story. Create a story with that metaphor. So you want to create something to do that has a story that involves this metaphor. Something visual, something catchy, will capture people's attention and get them thinking, aha, that's what that's about. Craig Valentine has a metaphor he likes to use in his speeches. It's about the crabs in a barrel. And he goes into this story about crabs, the fact that crabs, when they're in a barrel, you put them all in a barrel, each crab will try to crawl out of the barrel, but then before they get out of the barrel, another crab will catch it and pull it back down into the barrel. And Craig develops this idea of crabs in a barrel, and he creates a metaphor for that that says that's just like the people who hold you back in life. You want to get going, and they're just going to pull you down. So that's the metaphor, and he elaborates on it, builds and develops it, and he has this story that goes with it about the crabs in a barrel, and don't hang around the crabs in a barrel. And to make the story even more powerful, more engaging, more interesting, he has this little thing he does that mimes crabs pulling other crabs back into the barrel. So he says, as one crab tries to crawl out, another crab will get it, catch a hold of that crab, and pull it back into the barrel. He does this kind of thing. And that gesture, after a while, comes to symbolize those crabs in a barrel. It comes to symbolize that metaphor. So when you're creating your metaphor story, think also about the visuals. What visuals can you use? What gestures can you use that will get the audience involved, get the audience thinking, until finally you've got a solid story, you've got solid gestures. The gestures alone will be enough to get the entire story going in the audience's mind. And this is the power of metaphors. If you can take that metaphor and turn it into a story that captures attention and gets people thinking in a different way, and then create a gesture to go with that story, you've got an interesting story, you've got an engaged audience. For a world champion speaker, Craig Valentine, it's all about crabs in a barrel. For your story, do something different. something different. By going through this process, now you understand how you can compare something to something else, how this is like that, or this is just like that, or this is the same as. Understand how you can use those stories, develop that metaphor, make a powerful point for your audience. There are 3 important tools you have to use when you're going to master metaphors. One important tool is simply to start thinking about what are all the possible things that could be used for a metaphor. What could you possibly compare something to? And in thinking about that, keep in mind your audience. And be careful not to censor. It's very easy to censor yourself. Just think big picture. What are all the different things that I can think about that I can compare something to? So if your speech is all about speaking, what is your audience interested in? What are the different things you could talk about and compare that to your audience? At this point, don't censor. Keep the mind wide open, because the second tool will help you actually create that metaphor. Right now you're just thinking about all the possibilities. So open up to all those possibilities and think, what would I like to be a metaphor? It's basically the question you're asking yourself. What metaphor would be great to have because it fit perfectly with my audience? Then the second step is figuring out how that metaphor works and creating that metaphor. And creating that metaphor is, remember, a piece of paper, line down the middle, and on one side you had the thing you're talking about, on the other side the thing you're comparing that to. And then you just write down all the different things you can think about on one side about what you're talking about. And on the other side of the paper, write down all the things that about the thing you're comparing it to. And if you do that, and if you fill it out, and really go through all the different things there, you'll find it's amazing how interconnected everything really is. How things you think have no connection at all, suddenly when you start going through the list and start comparing each side and finding out, okay, this is on this side, it's the same on that side, there's a connection here. Never thought about that. Well, your audience definitely never thought about it either. So you'll be bringing them new, interesting information. You'll hook them, you pull them in, because suddenly they'll be thinking of things in a completely different way. So make sure when you're going through and listing all the stuff you can on both sides, make it an exhausted, complete list. List a lot of stuff there. And the third tool, the final tool, most important tool, is take all those metaphors you're creating and put them into a story. Nothing sells like a story. A story has magical abilities to pull us in, get us interested in thinking about what happens next, what happens next. So use the story. Somehow take your metaphors and put them into a story, and along with that story, create some sort of gestures. Crabs in a barrel gesture of Craig Valentine. Create your own gestures. Your own unique gestures that come to symbolize that metaphor, symbolize that story. And then in your audience's mind, it finally takes over and they think, ah, I see this, I think crabs in a barrel. I see this, I think someone trying to pull me down. Powerful technique. After the right story and the right gesture, it can all come together. One of the more overlooked things in public speaking, metaphors. Metaphors can be incredibly powerful because they compare something that you know with something you don't know, and they find that connection. They can take an audience and put it right into exactly where you want them to be. By making a connection the audience understands, the audience can think about. And it has this ability to get the audience in. It almost hypnotizes the audience. A powerful metaphor can hypnotize the audience, pull them in, and make magic happen. These are the three tools you need. Make the metaphor happen. Use these three tools of thinking about possible metaphors, creating the metaphor, putting the metaphor in a story with gestures. Master the metaphor. Mesmerize your audience.